I am Claire, 22, and literally last weekend, my rep as the family's financial whiz, yeah, it totally backfired. The education trust fund I'd worked my butt off to protect? It blew up into a full-on family meltdown at our so-called peaceful dinner at home. Greg, my stepfather, straight up demanded I hand over the money to cover his gambling debts, and when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You ungrateful brat," he yelled, with Mom and her blank stare just sitting there. But here's the tea. His threats didn't break me. They lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note. This story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now, back to the story. I've always been the odd one out in my family, the one who triple checks budgets while everyone else spends like there's no tomorrow. Growing up, I was the kid balancing my piggy bank, while Mom and Greg threw cash at vacations they couldn't afford. My dad left me that trust fund before he passed, a safety net for college, he said, to make sure I'd never be stuck. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to cover tuition and a bit beyond, and I've guarded it like a hawk. I'm in my final year at college, majoring in finance, with dreams of helping others manage their money someday. Numbers make sense to me. They don't lie or manipulate. People, though? That's another story. Last weekend I drove to Mom's house for what was supposed to be a low-key dinner. I'd been dreading it for weeks. Greg's been spiraling, his gambling's gotten worse, and Mom's been enabling him as usual. I pulled into the driveway, my stomach nodding, as I saw Greg's beat-up truck parked crookedly, like he'd rushed home from another bad bet. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Inside, the dining room smelled of Mom's overcooked lasagna, and the table was set with mismatched plates. Greg sat at the head, his fingers drumming impatiently, while Mom avoided my eyes, fussing with a salad nobody would eat. I barely sat down before Greg started in. "Claire, you're sitting on all that trust fund money," he said, his voice oily, like he was trying to sell me something. "It's just collecting dust. Help your family out." His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the familiar chill. Greg's charm always hid a threat. I gripped my fork, the metal cool against my palm, and took a slow breath. "That money's for my education," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's not a bailout fund." Mom shifted in her seat, her lips pressing into a thin line, but she said nothing. Typical. Greg leaned forward, his chair creaking. "You think you're better than us, don't you? Little Miss Perfect with her spreadsheets." His tone turned sharp, like a blade slipping out of its sheath. I wanted to snap back to tell him he's the one who blew his paycheck at the casino, but I bit my tongue. I've learned over the years that arguing with Greg is like wrestling a pig in mud. You both get dirty, and he enjoys it. Instead, I focused on the lasagna, cutting it into precise squares, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The tension grew thicker with every passing minute. Greg kept pushing, dropping hints about family loyalty and how I owed them for raising me. Raised me? I practically raised myself while they partied. Mom finally spoke, her voice soft but cutting. "Claire, maybe you could help just this once." My heart sank. Her betrayal stung worse than Greg's demands. I looked at her, searching for the mom who used to read me bedtime stories, but all I saw was a woman too scared to stand up to her husband. I pushed my plate away, the food untouched. "No," I said firmly. "That money's mine, and I'm not touching it." Greg's face darkened, his jaw clenching so hard I could see the muscles twitch. He slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses rattle. "You'll regret this," he growled. Mom flinched but stayed silent, her eyes fixed on her lap. I felt the room shrink, the walls closing in, but I held my ground. I wasn't just protecting my trust fund, I was protecting myself. That night, driving back to my dorm, I couldn't shake Greg's words. They echoed in my head, mixing with memories of all the times I'd tried to keep the peace, to be the good daughter. But good daughters don't get respect in my family. They get used. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and made a promise to myself. I'd never let Greg control me. Little did I know, that dinner was just the beginning of a nightmare that would test everything I thought I was capable of. As I sped down the dark highway back to campus, the streetlights blurring into streaks, those memories flooded in unbidden, pulling me back to all the times I'd been invisible in my own home. It wasn't just about the trust fund, it was a pattern, etched deep from years of being overlooked while Mom poured her energy into propping up Greg. I wiped at my eyes, the tears hot and unexpected, and let my mind drift to one specific afternoon that still burned, the day I won my high school scholarship. I was 17, bursting through the front door with the award letter clutched in my hand. My heart pounded from the excitement. I'd stayed up nights studying, skipping parties to hit the books, all to earn that full-ride partial scholarship for college. "Mom, look at this," I called out, waving the paper like a flag. She was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, her shoulders slumped as usual. Greg lounged on the couch, remote in hand, flipping channels. I thrust the letter toward her, my fingers trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "I did it! This covers half my tuition, means I won't have to take out huge loans." Mom glanced at it, her eyes skimming the words, without really focusing. She handed it back with a weak smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "That's nice, honey," she said, turning back to the pot. No hug, no questions about how I'd pulled it off. Greg didn't even look up, he just grunted, "Good for you," before cranking the volume on some sports game. I stood there, the paper crinkling in my grip, feeling the thrill deflate like a punctured balloon. That night, they went out to celebrate Greg's big win at the track. He'd netted a couple $100, enough for a steak dinner. I heard them laughing as they left, the door clicking shut behind them, while I ate cereal alone at the table. It wasn't a one-off. Flash forward a year and I was graduating high school with honors. I'd organized the whole ceremony myself, even printed invites because Mom forgot. The auditorium was packed, lights glaring down as I walked across the stage, my cap tassel swinging. The principal shook my hand, announcing my GPA and the finance club I'd led to nationals. Applause rippled through the crowd, but when I scanned for Mom and Greg, they were in the back row, Greg checking his phone, Mom whispering something to him. After, in the parking lot, I approached them, diploma in hand, sweat beading on my forehead from the stuffy gown. "Did you see? I got the award for top in economics," I said, trying to sound casual. Greg pocketed his phone, smirking. "Economics, huh? Real world's not about books, kid." Mom nodded along, her hand on his arm. "We're proud, Claire, but Greg's had a rough week, lost a job interview." They spent the drive home talking about his bad luck, how the boss was an idiot for not hiring him. My achievement? Buried under his excuses. By bedtime, I'd tucked the diploma away in a drawer, the sharp edges of the frame digging into my palm as I closed it. These moments stacked up, each one chipping away at me, like the time I landed my first part-time job at the campus bookstore, juggling shifts with classes to build my savings. I called home excited, my voice echoing in the empty dorm hallway as I paced. "Mom, I got the job. It'll help with expenses without dipping into the trust fund." She paused on the line, and I heard Greg in the background muttering about bills. "That's great," she said flatly. "But Greg needs help with the car payment. Maybe you could spot us a little?" My stomach twisted. I'd earned that job through sheer grit, showing up to interviews in my best thrift store blouse, ironed meticulously. Yet, it was dismissed, rerouted to their needs. Greg's failures, though, they got the spotlight. He'd blow money on slots, come home reeking of smoke, and Mom would fuss over him like a wounded hero. "He's trying," she'd say, rubbing his back as he slumped at the table, head in hands. I'd watch from the doorway, my own report cards or project awards gathering dust on the fridge, unpinned and unnoticed. Once, after I aced a midterm in accounting, scoring highest in the class, I texted Mom a photo of the grade. Her reply? "Good job. Greg's in a bad spot again." No questions about the test. No celebration. I deleted the message, my thumb hovering over the screen, feeling that familiar ache. It extended to smaller things too. Holidays, where I'd bake cookies from scratch, measuring ingredients precisely to make them perfect. Greg would complain they were too dry, and Mom would agree, serving store-bought pie instead. Or birthdays, mine passed with a card and a hurried happy birthday, while Greg's involved a cake and toasts to his potential. I'd blow out my candles alone in my room, the wax dripping onto the plate, wishing for once to be seen. Driving now, the road humming under my tires, I realized these weren't just oversights, they were choices. Mom chose Greg every time, enabling his messes while I faded into the background. My achievements, hard won through late nights and sacrifices, were invisible because they didn't serve their chaos. I clenched the wheel tighter, nails digging into the leather, anger bubbling up. Why did I keep trying? The trust fund was my line in the sand, the one thing they couldn't touch. But deep down, I knew Greg wouldn't stop pushing. As the dorm lights appeared on the horizon, I exhaled slowly, promising myself I'd break this cycle. No more invisibility. Yet, the next call from Mom would drag me right back in. Back in my dorm that night, after the drive from Mom's house, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan whirred overhead, casting shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. I tossed in my narrow bed, the sheets tangling around my legs, replaying Greg's demands and Mom's silence. That's when it hit me, the aha moment that changed everything. It wasn't new, it had been building since Dad's death, but that dinner crystallized it. The trust fund wasn't just money, it was my ticket out, my secret weapon against their chaos. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing, and reached for the locked box under my bed where I kept the documents. Pulling it out, the metal latch clicked open with a soft snap, and I spread the papers across my comforter under the dim desk lamp. The trust fund statement stared back, the numbers crisp and black, enough for tuition, books, and a modest start post-graduation. Dad had set it up when I was 10, right before his cancer diagnosis. I remembered him explaining it, his voice weak but firm, sitting in his hospital bed with tubes snaking around him. "This is for you, Claire," he'd said, his hand squeezing mine, dry and papery. "Don't let anyone touch it. It's your future." I'd nodded, wide-eyed, not fully understanding then. Now, at 22, it was my lifeline. But safeguarding it hadn't been easy. The intense struggle started right after Dad passed. I was 12 and Greg moved in fast, too fast. He started sniffing around the finances, asking Mom casual questions about assets. I overheard them one night, peeking through the cracked kitchen door. Greg's voice was low, persuasive. That fund could help with the house payments. Mom hesitated, twisting a dish towel in her hands, but eventually nodded. My stomach dropped. I slipped back to my room, heart pounding, and hid the access info Dad had given me, a password and account number scribbled on a note. From then on, I became its silent guardian. In high school, when Greg's gambling first surfaced, he'd pressure me directly. "Hey kid, spot me some cash from your dad's stash," he'd say, cornering me in the hallway, his breath sour from beer. I'd shake my head, backing away until my shoulders hit the wall, my palms sweating. "It's locked until college," I'd lie, avoiding his gaze. He never pushed too hard then, maybe because I was a minor, but the threats lingered in his narrowed eyes. The real battle came when I turned 18 and gained partial access. Greg amped up. One evening he barged into my room unannounced, the door slamming against the wall. I jumped, dropping my textbook, pages fluttering. "Time to contribute, Claire," he said, looming over me, his shadow swallowing the desk light. He demanded I transfer funds for his debts. My fingers trembled as I clutched the chair arms, but I refused, my voice barely above a whisper. "No, Greg, it's for school." He laughed, a harsh bark, and left, but not before knocking my lamp over, the bulb shattering on the floor. I swept up the glass shards later, each piece cutting into my resolve to protect it. I dove deeper into safeguarding. Late nights in the library, I researched trusts, my eyes straining under fluorescent lights, fingers flying over the keyboard. I learned about irrevocable clauses. Dad had made it ironclad. No one could touch it without my consent, and even then, only for education. But Greg didn't know that. I started moving statements online, setting up two-factor authentication, my phone buzzing with codes I'd memorize and delete. Every login, I'd double-check the IP, paranoia creeping in as I imagined him hacking somehow. The struggle peaked last year. Greg hit rock bottom, lost big at poker, creditors calling non-stop. The phone rang incessantly, jangling my nerves even from my dorm. Mom texted pleading, "Help us, Claire, just a loan." I ignored it at first, but guilt gnawed. One weekend home, Greg ambushed me in the living room. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in like vices, bruising the skin. "Sign over the money," he hissed, his face inches from mine, spittle flecking my cheek. I yanked away, pain shooting up my elbow, and ran to my room, barricading the door with a chair. Heart hammering, I called the bank from under the covers, whispering to confirm no unauthorized access. They assured me it was safe, test, but I didn't sleep that night, ears straining for footsteps. Through it all, the fund became my hidden success. I invested small portions wisely, index funds, low-risk bonds, watching it grow modestly. By junior year, it covered extras like internships without loans. I aced finance classes, applying what I learned, tracking growth in a private spreadsheet. No one knew. I didn't brag. It was my secret triumph, a quiet rebellion. While Greg squandered, I built. The balance ticked up, each dollar a brick in my independence wall. But the emotional toll was brutal. Nights, I'd cry silently, pillow muffling sobs, questioning why Dad left me this burden. Was it a gift or a curse? It isolated me. Friends partied while I budgeted. Yet, it forged me. I volunteered at a financial literacy clinic, teaching others to protect assets, my voice gaining strength with each session. The fund symbolized more, my worth untied to their approval. Now in the dorm, papers in hand, I traced Dad's signature, the ink faded but resolute. Greg's latest demand echoed, but I felt a shift, a fierce protectiveness. This wasn't just money, it was Dad's legacy, my armor. I'd fought tooth and nail from whispered lies to bruised arms, turning struggles into strength. As dawn broke, light filtering through blinds, I locked the box away, resolve hardening. The fund was safe, my success hidden but massive in its power. Little did I know, Greg's desperation would soon explode, testing that armor in ways I never imagined. As the morning light strengthened through my dorm window, painting stripes across the floor, I set the locked box back under my bed with a deliberate push, the carpet muffling the slide. My resolve felt solid, like a weight I could carry, but exhaustion tugged at me. I hadn't slept more than a couple hours. I stood up slowly, my knees popping, and glanced at the clock, 8:17 a.m. Graduation was just weeks away, my cap and gown already ordered, and with it came the full release of the trust fund's remaining balance. That meant real independence, a job lined up at a local credit union, helping low-income families with budgeting. It was a life-changing step, one I'd earned through internships and late-night cramming. But first, I had to survive the annual family dinner tonight, the one Mom insisted on every year to keep us connected. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against a stack of textbooks, and I knew without looking it was her. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the screen before swiping to answer. "Hey Mom," I said, forcing my voice to sound neutral as I paced the small room, my bare feet sinking into the worn rug. The line crackled slightly, and I heard the faint clatter of dishes in the background, probably her washing up after Greg's breakfast. "Claire, you are coming tonight, right?" she asked, her tone a mix of plea and accusation, like I'd already disappointed her. I leaned against the wall, the cool plaster grounding me, and closed my eyes. "Yeah, I'll be there," I replied, even as my stomach twisted. Why did I agree? Habit maybe, or that lingering hope she'd finally see me. She sighed, the sound heavy and familiar. "Good, Greg's been stressed. The debts are piling up, you know, he lost again last night." Her voice dropped, as if saying it quieter made it less real. I gripped the phone tighter, my nails pressing into the case, feeling the plastic give slightly. "Mom, that's not my problem," I said, keeping my words measured, but inside anger simmered. How many times had I heard this? Greg's bad luck at the casino, the track, online poker, it was endless. I'd seen the bills stacking on the kitchen counter during visits, red stamps screaming overdue. And now, with my graduation looming, I could sense the shift. Greg's eyes would be on my trust fund more than ever, like a shark circling blood. "Tonight's important," Mom continued, ignoring my comment. "We're family. Bring something nice, maybe that pie you make." I rolled my eyes, though she couldn't see, and moved to my closet, pulling out a simple blouse with one hand. The fabric felt soft, but uninviting. Dressing for these dinners always felt like armor. "Sure," I muttered, laying the blouse on my bed and rummaging for jeans that weren't too faded. She prattled on about the menu, roast chicken, her attempt at normalcy, while I half listened, my mind racing ahead. Graduation meant freedom. A steady paycheck, my own apartment, no more bailing out their messes. I'd already scouted listings online, imagining a place with locks Greg couldn't pick. But tonight? It was a minefield. Greg's desperation had been building. Last weekend's demand at dinner was just a preview. As Mom talked, I sat on the edge of the bed, folding the blouse absent-mindedly, creasing the sleeves with precise folds. "He's been talking about your fund again," she admitted finally, her voice hesitant. My hands stilled, the fabric bunching under my fingers. There it was. The real reason for the call. He thinks you could help, just a little, for the family. I stood up abruptly, the phone slipping slightly in my sweaty palm. No, Mom, we've been over this. My voice rose, sharper than intended, echoing in the empty room. Silence stretched on the line, broken only by her soft breathing. Claire, please. He's not himself when he's like this. Not himself? That was her excuse every time. After he yelled, after he slammed doors, after he grabbed her wrist too hard. I walked to the window, parting the blinds with 2 fingers to peer at the campus below. Students hustling to classes, backpacks slung over shoulders, carefree. Envy pricked me. My life felt tethered to this drama. I'll come, I said finally, but I'm not discussing money. She murmured agreement, but I knew it was hollow. We hung up, the click final, and I tossed the phone onto the pillow, watching it bounce. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, dark circles under my eyes, hair messy from the sleepless night. I ran a brush through it, each stroke deliberate, trying to tame the tangles, as if that could calm my thoughts. Preparation kicked in then. A ritual to steel myself. I showered quickly, the hot water pounding my back, steam fogging the mirror. As I lathered shampoo suds dripping down my arms, I rehearsed responses in my head. No. It's my future. Stop asking. But doubt crept in. What if Greg pushed harder? His temper had worsened with the debts. I'd seen the broken lamp from his last outburst, shards Mom swept under the rug. Toweling off, droplets beating on my skin, I dressed methodically, buttoning the blouse, each button a small act of control. I chose earrings Dad had given me, simple silver hoops, twisting them in with care, feeling their weight as a reminder of his protection. By afternoon I packed a small bag, keys, wallet, the pie ingredients I'd grabbed from the store on the way. Sitting at my desk I opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life, and checked my email. There it was, confirmation for my post-grad job interview next week. We're excited to discuss your role in financial counseling, it read. My heart lifted slightly. This was my deal, my verge of change. Helping others avoid the traps Greg fell into. Teaching independence. I printed the email, folding it neatly into my pocket, the paper crisp against my thigh. But as the hours ticked toward evening, anxiety built. I paced again, shoes scuffing the floor, imagining the dinner table, Greg at the head, fists clenched under the napkin, Mom's averted eyes. His debts were mounting. I'd overheard collectors calling last time, voices booming through the phone. He'd eye me like prey, demands veiled in family talk. I stopped pacing, sinking into my chair, head in hands, fingers pressing into my temples. Why go? Because cutting ties felt scarier than facing them. Yet with graduation so close, I felt the shift. I was almost free. Finally, as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, I grabbed my keys, the metal jangling. One more dinner, I told myself, locking the door behind me with a firm click. The hallway air felt cooler, a breeze from an open window ruffling my hair. Little did I know, this annual connection would shatter everything, forcing me to confront the monster Greg truly was. The drive to Mom's house felt longer than usual, the familiar streets stretching out like they were trying to delay the inevitable. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles paling as I turned onto their block, the pie I'd picked up from the store cooling on the passenger seat. The house loomed ahead, lights glowing in the windows, but it didn't feel welcoming, just obligatory. I parked behind Greg's truck, noting how it hogged most of the driveway, forcing me to angle awkwardly. Grabbing the pie box, the cardboard warm under my fingers, I stepped out into the cooling evening air, the scent of cut grass mixing with distant barbecue smoke from a neighbor. My footsteps crunched on the gravel path, each one heavier as I approached the door. I knocked lightly, more out of habit than necessity, and Mom opened it almost immediately like she'd been waiting. "Claire, you're here," she said, her voice a forced chirp, pulling me into a quick hug that felt more like a pat-down. Her arms were thin, tense, and she smelled of floral perfume masking something sharper. Worry, maybe. I handed her the pie, the box shifting in her grasp. "Smells good," she added, but her eyes darted past me, as if checking if I'd come alone. Inside, the living room was dim, the TV murmuring some game show in the background. Greg sat in his recliner, feet up, a beer can balanced on the armrest. He didn't stand, just nodded curtly, his eyes flicking over me like I was an intruder. "About time," he muttered, taking a swig. the can crinkling slightly. I slipped off my shoes by the door, toes curling against the cold tile, and followed Mom to the kitchen. The table was set simply: plates, forks, the chicken steaming in a dish. No extras, no fuss. We sat down without much preamble, the chairs scraping against the floor. Greg forked a piece of chicken onto his plate first, juices dripping, and started eating right away, chewing loudly. Mom served me next, her hand trembling a bit as she passed the platter. "How's school?" she asked, settling into her seat, folding her napkin in her lap with precise creases. "It's fine," I said, spearing a carrot, the forked tines scraping the plate. "Finals are coming up." I kept it vague, not wanting to invite more. But Greg jumped in, his mouth half full. "Fine? That's all? With that fancy trust fund paying your way, you'd think you'd be top of the class or something." His tone was mocking, a backhanded jab disguised as interest. I swallowed, the food tasting like cardboard, and met his gaze steadily. "I'm doing well," I replied, setting my fork down gently to avoid clinking it too hard. He snorted, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Well, what's that mean? You got a job lined up, or are you planning to live off Daddy's money forever?" Mom shifted uncomfortably, her chair creaking, but she busied herself with buttering a roll, tearing it into small pieces. "Greg, let's not," she started, but he waved her off, his hand cutting through the air. "No, Alice, she needs to hear it. Kid's been coddled too long." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, pointing his fork at me like a weapon. The tines gleamed under the overhead light. "You think life's easy? I've been busting my ass, and what do I get? Nothing. But you sit on that pile of cash acting all high and mighty." His words landed like slaps, each one building on the last, his voice rising just enough to fill the room without yelling, yet. I felt my cheeks heat, but I kept my expression neutral, folding my hands in my lap, fingers interlacing tightly. "The fund is for education," I said calmly, though my pulse thrummed in my ears. "I've told you that." He laughed, a short, bitter sound, and took another bite, chewing slowly as if savoring the moment. "Education, right. Fancy word for wasting time. Meanwhile, we're drowning here. Bills up to our necks." Mom glanced at me then, her eyes pleading. "Don't argue," they said. But I couldn't stay silent. "You mean your gambling bills," I corrected, my voice steady but edged. The words hung there, sharp and undeniable. Greg's face hardened, his jaw tightening as he set his fork down with a deliberate clank. "Watch your mouth," he warned, his fingers drumming on the table, nails tapping rhythmically. "You owe us. We raised you after your dad kicked off." Mom flinched at the mention, her hand pausing mid-reach for the salt. "Greg," she whispered, but it was weak, barely audible. He ignored her, his eyes boring into mine. "And what do we get? Attitude. You think you're better because you crunch numbers? Real life ain't spreadsheets, princess." The nickname stung, a twist on what Dad used to call me affectionately. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting a faint metallic tang, and pushed my plate away slightly, the ceramic scraping. The barrage continued, question after question laced with contempt. "So what's this job you're chasing? Some desk gig where you tell people how to spend their money?" Greg pressed, smirking as he leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, his shirt strained at the buttons. "Sounds thrilling. Bet it pays peanuts." I took a sip of water, the glass cool against my lips, buying time. "It's in financial counseling," I said, setting the glass down carefully. "Helping people avoid debt." The irony wasn't lost on me, and from his narrowing eyes, not on him either. "Avoid debt? Like us, you mean?" He uncrossed his arms, leaning in again. "Hypocrite, you could help right now, one transfer and we're square." Mom finally interjected, her voice shaky. "Claire, honey, maybe think about it, just a little help." Her betrayal cut deeper than Greg's barbs. I looked at her, searching her face, but she avoided my gaze, focusing on pushing food around her plate. "No," I said firmly to both of them. "It's not happening." Greg's drumming stopped, his hand flattening on the table. "Ungrateful," he spat, the word venomous. "After everything. We fed you, clothed you." I wanted to laugh, bitterly, remembering the thrift store clothes, the nights I cooked my own meals, but I held back, my nails digging into my palms under the table. The dinner dragged, each minute a gauntlet. Greg peppered in more compliments, how I was so smart but clueless about family, how my degree was worthless paper. Mom nodded along faintly, her silence complicit. I endured it, responding minimally, my posture straight despite the weight pressing down. By dessert, the pie I'd brought, sliced unevenly by Greg's knife, the air was thick with unspoken threats. He took the largest piece, fork stabbing into it. "Tastes store-bought," he grumbled, a final dig. I said nothing, I just watched the clock, willing the hands to move faster. But as the evening wore on, I sensed the shift. Greg's patience fraying, his manipulations turning darker. Little did I know, refusal tonight would push him over the edge. The pie crumbs scattered across Greg's plate like debris from a storm, and he pushed it away with a grunt, his chair scraping back as he stood up abruptly. The sudden movement made Mom flinch, her fork clattering against her dish, but she quickly composed herself, folding her hands in her lap. I remained seated, my back straight against the wooden chair, the slats digging into my spine, feeling the shift in the air, like the pressure drop before thunder. Greg paced to the kitchen counter, his heavy footsteps thudding on the linoleum, and grabbed another beer from the fridge, the door slamming shut with a force that rattled the bottles inside. He cracked it open, foam hissing out, and took a long swig, wiping his mouth with his sleeve before turning back to us. His eyes, bloodshot from whatever he'd been drinking earlier, locked onto me with an intensity that made my skin prick. "You know what, Claire?" he said, his voice low at first, building like a engine revving. He set the beer down hard on the counter, liquid sloshing over the rim. "I've had enough of your bullshit." Mom's eyes widened, darting between us, but she stayed silent, her fingers twisting the napkin into knots. I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't move, didn't break eye contact. "Greg, sit down," I said evenly, though my voice carried an edge I couldn't hide. "We're done talking about this." He laughed, but it was hollow, echoing off the walls, and he stepped closer, his shadow falling over the table. "Done? Oh, we're just getting started, princess." He leaned over me, one hand gripping the back of my chair, his knuckles brushing my shoulder. The smell of beer and sweat hit me, sour and overwhelming. "You think you can waltz in here, eat our food, and spit in our faces? That trust fund, it's family money now. Hand it over, or get out." His words slurred slightly, but the threat was clear, sharp as a knife. I pushed my chair back slightly, the legs screeching, creating a few inches of space. "It's not yours," I repeated, my hands flat on the table to steady myself. "Dad left it for me, for school. You have no right." Mom finally spoke, her voice a whisper. "Claire, please, don't make this worse." Her plea hung there, pathetic and enabling, and it fueled my resolve. "Worse? He's the one demanding what isn't his." Greg's face twisted, veins bulging in his neck as he straightened up, his fist clenching at his side. "No right? I married your mom, raised your ass when your deadbeat dad couldn't. I have every right!" He slammed his palm on the table, making the plates jump, a glass tipping over and spilling water that spread like a stain. I stood up then, slowly, my chair tipping back but not falling. "Raised me? You barely tolerated me. And this ends now. I'm not giving you a dime." The words came out stronger than I felt, my legs steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. That's when it escalated. Greg's eyes darkened, his breathing heavy, and he grabbed my arm, fingers digging in like claws, yanking me toward him. Pain shot up my elbow, hot and immediate. "You little bitch," he snarled, his face inches from mine, spittle flecking my cheek. "You'll do what I say." I tried to pull away, twisting my body, but his grip tightened, bruising the skin. "Let go!" I shouted, my free hand pushing at his chest, feeling the rapid thump of his heart under his shirt. Mom stood up finally, her chair falling over with a crash. "Greg, stop!" she cried, but it was half-hearted. She didn't move closer, just hovered by the table, wringing her hands. He didn't stop. With a roar, he shoved me hard, my back hitting the counter edge, a sharp jolt radiating through my ribs. I gasped, air knocked out, but scrambled to regain balance, grabbing the sink for support. The faucet dripped steadily, a mundane sound amid the chaos. "You think you're tough?" Greg advanced, his fists balled now. "I'll show you." I dodged his next grab, sidestepping toward the doorway, my heart pounding in my ears. "Mom, call someone!" I yelled, but she froze, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. Or was it indifference? She just stood there, watching, her lips parted but no words coming out. Greg lunged again, faster this time, his hand connecting with my shoulder, spinning me around. I stumbled, my foot catching on the rug's edge, and he took the opening. His boot came down hard on my leg as I fell, a deliberate stomp just above the knee. The crack was audible, like a branch snapping, followed by blinding pain that exploded through my body. I screamed, collapsing to the floor, my hands instinctively clutching my thigh, feeling the unnatural give under the fabric of my jeans. Tears blurred my vision, hot and streaming down my face. "You broke it," I gasped, the words choking out between sobs. "You bastard, you broke my leg." He stood over me, chest heaving, his face flushed but satisfied, like he'd won some twisted game. "That's what you get," he panted, flexing his fingers. "Ungrateful whore. You're done here, disowned, cut off, don't come back." Mom finally moved, but not to help me. She went to him, her hand on his arm, murmuring, "Calm down, Greg. It's over." She glanced at me, her expression a mix of pity and resignation, but she didn't kneel down, didn't call 911. She just watched, standing by as I writhed on the cold floor, pain pulsing in waves that made me nauseous. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, fingers numb and shaking, the screen lighting up as I dialed emergency services. "Help," I whispered into it when they answered, my voice breaking. "My stepfather attacked me, I think my leg's broken." The operator's calm questions grounded me slightly, addressed details, but the pain was overwhelming, spots dancing in my vision. Greg snatched the phone from my hand, ending the call with a smash against the counter, the screen cracking. "No cops," he growled, kicking my hand away when I reached for it. Fresh agony shot up my arm, but it was nothing compared to my leg. Mom bent down then, not to comfort, but to pick up the shattered phone pieces, avoiding my eyes. "You should have listened," she said softly, almost to herself. Her words were the final blow, deeper than any physical hit, betrayed by her inaction, her choice to stand by him. Sirens wailed in the distance, maybe a neighbor heard my scream, and Greg cursed, pacing again. "This is on you," he spat at me, before grabbing his keys and storming out the back door, the screen banging shut. I lay there, breath ragged, staring at the ceiling light fixture dotted with dead bugs. The pain throbbed, but so did the realization, this was the verdict. Disowned, not just in words, but in violence and abandonment. Mom hovered nearby, finally dialing 911 herself, her voice trembling as she spoke, but it was too late for us, her standing by had sealed it. As paramedics burst in minutes later, their boots thumping, I closed my eyes against the betrayal, vowing silently that this break wouldn't define me. It would propel me forward, away from them forever. The paramedics' voices blurred into a haze as they lifted me onto the stretcher, their gloved hands careful but efficient, securing straps across my chest and hips with quick snaps. Pain radiated from my leg in relentless waves, each jolt as the wheels bumped over the threshold making me grit my teeth, a low moan escaping despite my efforts. Mom trailed behind them, her footsteps hesitant on the porch, clutching her cardigan like a shield. "She's my daughter," she said to one of them, her voice cracking, but they barely acknowledged her, focused on me. The night air hit my face as they wheeled me out, cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of rain on the horizon. Neighbors' lights flicked on, curtains twitching, but I kept my eyes squeezed shut, tears leaking from the corners. In the ambulance, the siren wailed to life, a piercing cry that matched the one building in my throat. One paramedic, a woman with short hair and kind eyes, knelt beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Claire, right? I'm Sarah. We're getting you to the hospital. Hang in there." She slipped an IV into my arm, the needle prick barely registering amid the agony, and taped it down with precise movements. The vehicle rocked gently as it sped through streets, lights flashing outside the windows. I clutched the edge of the stretcher, my fingers numb, whispering through chattering teeth. "He did this, my stepfather." Sarah nodded, her pen scratching on a clipboard. "Police are on their way. Tell me what happened." I recounted it in fragments, Greg's demands, the shove, the stomp, my voice breaking on the details, each word pulling fresh sobs. Mom had followed in her car, but in that moment, alone with strangers, the betrayal hit harder. Sarah listened without judgment, her expression steady, occasionally squeezing my hand. "You're safe now," she said softly, adjusting the oxygen mask over my nose and mouth, the plastic fogging with my breaths. The mask smelled sterile, like plastic and medicine, grounding me slightly. As we pulled into the ER bay, doors swinging open with a whoosh, the chaos enveloped me, beeps, shouts, wheels rolling on tile. They transferred me to a gurney, the motion sending fresh fire through my leg, and rushed me inside. Bright lights overhead blurred into halos as nurses swarmed, scissors snipping my jeans to expose the injury, the fabric peeling away cold against my skin. "Compound fracture," one doctor muttered, his gloved fingers probing gently, making me arch in pain. They hooked me to monitors, beeps syncing with my racing heart, and pushed morphine through the IV. The drug hit like a warm wave, dulling the edges, but not the fear. "Where's my mom?" I asked hoarsely, craning my neck. A nurse patted my arm. "She's in the waiting room, we'll update her soon." That's when the police arrived. 2 officers, badges glinting under the fluorescents, notebooks in hand. The taller one, Officer Ramirez, pulled up a stool beside my bed, his voice calm but firm. "Claire, can you tell us about the assault?" I nodded weakly, the morphine making my thoughts fuzzy but not erasing the memory. I described the dinner, Greg's escalating rage, the grab, the shove, the deliberate crush of his boot. My words tumbled out, punctuated by winces as a tech adjusted my leg for x-rays, the machine humming loudly. Ramirez jotted notes, his pen scratching steadily, while his partner photographed my bruises, purple blooms on my arm, the swelling around my knee. "And your mother?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "She watched," didn't stop him. The admission hung heavy, my chest tightening. Ramirez exchanged a glance with his partner. "We'll speak to her? And Greg?" "He left," I said, my fist clenching the sheet, fabric bunching under my palm. "But he'll come back, he always does." They assured me of a restraining order, their voices professional, but it felt like a band-aid on a gaping wound. As they left, promising to arrest him, a social worker slipped in, Miss Elena, her ID badge swinging as she sat down. She had warm brown eyes and a notepad not unlike the officers. "I'm here to help," she said, pulling her chair closer, the legs scraping softly. "This wasn't your fault." We talked, or rather, I poured out years of tension, Greg's manipulations, Mom's enabling, the trust fund battles. My voice grew stronger with each sentence, the morphine easing the physical pain enough to let emotions flow. Elena listened, nodding, her hand occasionally touching mine in reassurance. "You have options," she explained, flipping pages in a pamphlet she handed me, the paper crisp. "Shelters, counseling, legal aid for survivors." Survivors. The word echoed. I was one now. She mentioned pressing charges, testifying, steps toward justice. "It starts with your statement," she said, helping me fill out forms, my signature shaky but deliberate. But the real shift came when my phone, reassembled somehow by a nurse, buzzed on the side table. It was my roommate, Jess, her name lighting up the cracked screen. I'd texted her earlier, frantic, before Greg smashed it fully. I answered with trembling fingers, the phone cool against my ear. "Claire, oh God, are you okay? I called the cops when your message cut off." Her voice was frantic, laced with worry, a stark contrast to Mom's silence. Tears welled again as I explained, words spilling. "He broke my leg, Jess. Mom just watched." She gasped, then rallied. "I'm coming, and I contacted that professor you like, the one in victim advocacy. She's got connections." Minutes later, as Elena stepped out, another call came. Professor Harlan, her tone authoritative yet kind. "Claire, Jess filled me in. I'm sorry this happened." She spoke of resources, a pro bono lawyer specializing in domestic violence, therapy groups on campus, even scholarship extensions for medical leave. "You've been strong," she said, "but you don't have to do this alone." Her words cracked something inside me, not humiliation but empowerment. Here was help, unasked but given, revealing a network I'd built unknowingly through my studies and volunteering. My success wasn't the fund, it was this resilience, these allies. As the night wore on, doctors set my leg, numbing shots, the tug of bone aligning, plaster hardening around my calf with a chemical smell. Mom peeked in once, her face ashen, but I turned away, whispering to the nurse, "Not now." The calls continued. Friends offering rides, a counselor scheduling sessions, each one built a bridge out of the abyss. By dawn, casts drying, pain meds humming, I realized this assault, in its horror, had triggered intervention. Police reports filed, Greg hunted, support pouring in. It wasn't just survival, it was the start of justice. Exposing their abuse to light. Exhausted but resolute, I closed my eyes, the beeps lulling me, knowing this call, literal and figurative, had changed everything, propelling me toward healing and accountability. Sleep came in fits that morning, the hospital room's sterile hum blending with muffled voices from the hallway, pulling me in and out of consciousness. The morphine dulled the sharp edges of pain in my leg. but it couldn't touch the ache in my chest, the raw wound of betrayal that pulsed with every heartbeat. I shifted slightly under the thin blanket, the cast heavy and unyielding, pinning me in place, like a reminder of my vulnerability. A soft knock at the door jolted me fully awake, and there she was. Mom, slipping in quietly, her purse clutched tightly against her side, eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She hesitated in the doorway, the fluorescent light casting harsh shadows on her face, making her look older, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. But fragility wasn't an excuse anymore. "Claire," she whispered, stepping closer, her shoes squeaking faintly on the linoleum floor. She reached out a hand toward the bed rail but pulled back, fingers curling into her palm as if afraid to touch me. I didn't say anything at first, just watched her, my gaze steady despite the fog in my head. The monitors beeped steadily, a rhythmic accusation in the silence between us. She pulled up the visitor's chair, its legs dragging with a slow scrape, and sat down, perching on the edge like she might bolt at any moment. How are you feeling?" Her voice was small, tentative, as if testing the waters. I took a slow breath, the oxygen tube tugging slightly at my nostrils, and felt a surge of clarity cut through the haze. This was the moment, the scramble I'd sensed coming. Greg was out there, probably hiding or scheming, but Mom, she was here, trying to salvage whatever scraps of our family remained. "How do you think I'm feeling?" I replied, my tone even but laced with steel. I adjusted the pillow behind my head with one hand, the fabric rustling, buying a second to steady myself. Her eyes dropped to her lap where she twisted a tissue into shreds, tiny white flecks falling like snow onto her skirt. "I didn't know he'd go that far," she said finally, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He's been under so much pressure with the debts, you know how he gets." She glanced up then, pleading, her lower lip trembling slightly. Pressure. The word hung there, absurd and infuriating. I felt my jaw tighten, teeth grinding together with a faint click. "How he gets?" I echoed, sitting up a bit more, ignoring the twinge in my ribs. "You mean violent? Abusive? And you just stood there, Mom, watched him break my leg." My voice rose slightly, not a shout but enough to make her flinch, her shoulders hunching inward. She shook her head quickly, the tissue now balled in her fist. "I was scared, Claire. You don't understand, he's my husband, we have to stick together." Stick together. The hypocrisy of it burned in my throat like bile. I leaned forward as much as the IV line allowed, the tube pulling taut against my arm. Stick together? Where was that when Dad was dying? Or when I was busting my ass in school, trying to make something of myself? You've always chosen him, enabled him, while I faded into the background. My fingers gripped the bedsheet, knuckles whitening, the cotton bunching under my nails. Mom's face crumpled, tears spilling over, tracing shiny paths down her cheeks. She dabbed at them with the mangled tissue, her hand shaking. "That's not fair. I've tried to keep the peace. For all of us." Peace. Another lie she told herself. I could see it now, clear as the IV drip plinking into the bag beside me, the pattern of excuses, the way she'd rewrite reality to justify staying with him. "Peace?" I said, my voice dropping to a controlled whisper. "You call watching your daughter get attacked keeping the peace? You didn't even call for help until he was gone. You picked up the phone pieces instead of helping me." She stood up then, pacing a tight circle at the foot of the bed, her arms wrapped around herself. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I am, but Greg, he's not all bad. He provides." "He provides?" I cut her off, my hand slicing through the air. "Provides what? Debts? Fear? Bruises?" I listed them off, each word deliberate, watching her wince with every one. She stopped pacing, leaning against the wall, her palm flat against the cool surface as if for support. "You don't get it," she murmured. "Leaving isn't easy. We've built a life." A life. The word twisted something inside me. I thought of the life I'd built. The trust fund guarded through years of their pressure, the career on the horizon helping others escape exactly this. "You've built a prison," I said quietly but firmly. "And you've locked me in it too, by standing by. But not anymore." Her eyes met mine, wide and desperate, and she moved closer again, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away, tucking it under the blanket, the motion final. "Claire, please, we can fix this. Talk to the police. Tell them it was an accident, for the family." There it was, the scramble in full force. Not remorse, but damage control. I felt a cold calm settle over me, like the morphine but sharper, more empowering. Family? I repeated, letting the word linger. You disowned me last night, remember? Through him, and now you want me to lie to protect him? She nodded frantically, her hair falling into her eyes, which she brushed back with a trembling hand. Yes, for us, I'll make him apologize. We can move past this. I shook my head slowly, the pillow crinkling behind me. No, you chose him again, right there on the kitchen floor, while I screamed in pain. The memory flashed, her averted gaze, her murmured words to him instead of me, hypocrisy exposed, raw and undeniable. You've always preached loyalty, but only when it suits you. Loyal to him, not to me, not to Dad's memory. Her tears flowed freely now, but she didn't deny it, just sank back into the chair, shoulders slumping in defeat. In that silence, broken only by the distant cartwheels in the hall, I made my decision. I'm pressing charges, I said, my voice unwavering. Against both of you. Him for the assault, you for standing by, accessory, or whatever they call it. Her head snapped up, mouth opening in shock, but I continued. And I'm done. No more dinners, no more bailouts, you're not my family anymore. The words landed heavy, but liberating, like shedding a weight I'd carried too long. She rose unsteadily, clutching her purse strap so tight her knuckles blanched. You can't mean that. I'm your mother. Mother. The title felt hollow now. I met her gaze, unflinching. A mother protects her child. You didn't. She backed toward the door, steps faltering, hand fumbling for the handle. Claire. But I turned my head away, staring at the window where morning light filtered through blinds in slatted patterns. She lingered a moment, then the door clicked open and shut. Her footsteps fading down the corridor. Alone, I exhaled slowly, the breath shuddering out. My hand trembled as I reached for the call button, pressing it firmly, the buzz summoning a nurse. Everything okay? She asked, adjusting my pillow with gentle hands. Yeah, I said, a small smile forming despite the tears pricking my eyes. Just ready to move forward. The confrontation had been my exit, powerful final from their toxic world. No more hypocrisy to endure. As the nurse left, I closed my eyes, not in exhaustion, but in resolve, the path to justice and healing stretching ahead, unburdened. The nurse's footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving me in the quiet hum of the hospital room. The IV drip continuing its steady plink like a metronome counting out the seconds of my new reality. I lay there, staring at the slatted blinds where sunlight now streamed in fully, casting warm patterns on the white sheets that covered my casted leg. The morphine had worn off a bit, leaving a dull throb that matched the echo of Mom's departure. The click of the door, her hesitant retreat. But in that solitude, a different kind of warmth began to build, not from pain or anger, but from anticipation. My phone, propped on the bedside table with its cracked screen taped together by a helpful orderly, buzzed softly. It was Jess, my roommate, texting. On our way, bringing reinforcements. A small smile tugged at my lips, the muscles in my face relaxing for the first time since the attack. Minutes later, the door swung open again, but this time with energy. Jess bursting in first, her curly hair bouncing as she balanced a tray of coffee cups and a bouquet of wildflowers clutched in her arms. Behind her came Mia and Alex, my study group partners from finance class, carrying a stuffed bear and a bag of takeout that smelled like greasy comfort food. Claire Bear, Jess exclaimed, setting the tray down carefully on the rolling table, her hands fluttering as she adjusted the cups to avoid spilling. She leaned in for a gentle hug, her cheek pressing against mine, warm and smelling of vanilla shampoo. We heard everything. Professor Harlan called us, said you needed your squad. I shifted slightly, wincing as the cast pulled but waved them closer, my hand reaching out to squeeze Jess's fingers. You guys didn't have to, I said, my voice thick with emotion I hadn't expected. But they did. And that simple act stood in stark contrast to the cold dinner table at home, where Greg's demands had poisoned every bite. Here, no expectations hung in the air, just genuine concern. Mia, with her neat braid and ever-present notebook, pulled up a chair, her sneakers squeaking on the floor as she scooted it nearer. Of course we did, she said, unpacking the bag, burgers and fries, the wrappers crinkling invitingly. Can't have you surviving on hospital jello. Plus, we brought contraband. She winked, handing me a fry, golden and salty, which I nibbled slowly, the taste exploding on my tongue like a small victory. Alex sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle my leg, his tall frame folding awkwardly as he placed the bear beside me, its plush fur soft under my palm. "Tell us what happened, if you're up for it," he said, his voice low and steady, eyes meeting mine without pity, just solidarity. I took a deep breath, the coffee steam rising from the cup Jess handed me, warming my hands as I recounted the night. Not the full horror, but the key moments. Greg's stomp, Mom's inaction, the scramble in Mom's eyes this morning. My words flowed easier here, without the defensiveness I'd felt with the police or Elena. Jess nodded along, her hand rubbing small circles on my back, the motion soothing like a lullaby. "That bastard," she muttered when I finished, her fist clenching around a napkin, crumpling it into a ball. "And your mom, watching? That's unforgivable." The room filled with their reactions, not judgmental outbursts but thoughtful support. Mia jotted notes on her phone, her thumbs tapping rapidly. "I've got a friend in legal aid, pre-law major. She can help with the charges, and Professor Harlan mentioned therapy resources. We'll set up rides for you." Alex chimed in, unfolding a get-well card they'd all signed, the colorful signatures looping across the inside. "We're your family now, Claire. The chosen kind. No strings, no demands." His words hit deep, contrasting sharply with the biological ties that had snapped last night. Greg's, disowned, echoing in my mind like a slammed door, Mom's pleas a hollow ring. As we talked, the differences sharpened in my thoughts. At that toxic dinner, every glance from Greg had been a calculation, his fork stabbing food like a threat, Mom's silence a betrayal wrapped in folded napkins. Here Jess laughed as she recounted a silly dorm story to lighten the mood, her eyes crinkling at the corners, genuine mirth bubbling up. No backhanded compliments, no escalating contempt, just warmth. I felt it in the way Mia adjusted my pillow without being asked, her fingers fluffing it gently, or how Alex passed me the burger, unwrapping it halfway so I could eat one-handed. These were my true allies, built from shared late nights cramming for exams, coffee runs during internships, quiet confessions about dreams over pizza. The conversation deepened as the food disappeared, wrappers piled on the table like discarded worries. "Remember that group project?" Jess said, leaning back in her chair, crossing her legs. "When we pulled an all-nighter and you kept us going with your spreadsheets? That's you, strong even now." I nodded, tears pricking unexpectedly, but good ones this time. I wiped them with the back of my hand, the salt stinging a small cut on my knuckle from the fall. "I don't feel strong," I admitted, my voice soft, staring at the cast, its white surface already smudged from handling. "But with you guys, maybe I can be." Alex squeezed my shoulder, his grip firm but brief, a silent affirmation. We spent the afternoon like that. Hours blending as sunlight shifted across the walls. They shared updates from campus, finals gossip, job fair tips, even a funny meme on Mia's phone that had us all chuckling, my laughter bubbling up despite the ache. No one pushed for more details or offered empty platitudes. They just were there, filling the space Mom had left empty. As visiting hours wound down, Jess gathered the trash, her movements efficient, tying the bag with a quick knot. "We'll be back tomorrow," she promised, hugging me again, her arms lingering. Mia and Alex followed, each with a fist bump or wave, the door closing softly behind them. Alone again, but not lonely, I traced the bear's ear with my finger, the fur soft and reassuring. The contrast settled in my chest like a balm, the biological family that had shattered me versus this chosen one, pieced together from trust and mutual respect. No gauntlet of contempt here, just a genuine web of support. It wasn't about replacing what I'd lost, it was about recognizing what I'd gained. As the room dimmed with evening, I closed my eyes, the throb in my leg fading into background noise, replaced by a quiet gratitude. These allies weren't blood, but they were real. My foundation for whatever came next, solid and unwavering. The evening light faded completely as I drifted into a shallow sleep, the hospital room's quiet broken only by the occasional beep of the monitor and the distant roll of a cart in the hall. When I woke the next morning, sunlight pierced the blinds again, but sharper, more insistent, mirroring the clarity settling in my mind. The nurse came in early, her tray clattering softly as she checked my vitals, her fingers cool on my wrist as she counted my pulse. "How's the pain?" she asked, adjusting the IV drip with a twist of the valve. "Manageable," I replied, though my leg throbbed under the cast, a constant reminder. But the real ache was deeper. Emotional debris from the attack, Mom's visit, the friend's warmth. Today I decided was for building walls, not licking wounds. Discharge loomed in a few days, and I needed protections in place. Jess arrived mid-morning, her backpack slung over one shoulder, laptop tucked under her arm like a shield. She sat up on the rolling table, pushing aside the remnants of breakfast, a half-eaten toast crust, congealed eggs. "Professor Harlan connected me with that lawyer," she said, opening her computer with a click, the screen glowing to life. "She's doing this pro bono, specializes in domestic violence cases. Video call in 10? I nodded, propping myself up higher, the bed remote whirring as it adjusted. My hand smoothed the blanket over my lap, fingers tracing the woven pattern, a small act of control in the chaos. The call connected with a chime, and there was Attorney Reyes, sharp features, dark hair pulled back, her background a neat office shelf lined with law books. "Claire, I'm Sophia," she said, her voice steady through the speakers, leaning forward slightly as if to bridge the digital gap. Jess angled the laptop so I could see clearly, her hand lingering on my shoulder for support. Sophia's eyes met mine on the screen, compassionate but professional. "I've reviewed the police report. Strong case for assault against Greg, and potentially aiding and abetting for your mother. But first, boundaries. What do you want?" I took a breath, the air tasting medicinal, and laid it out. The no-contact order, blocking their numbers, changing locks on anything shared. My fingers tapped the bed rail rhythmically as I spoke, each tap punctuating a point. "I don't want them near me. Ever." Sophia nodded, jotting notes on a pad, her pen scratching audibly. "We can file for a restraining order today. Covers physical proximity, calls, even through third parties. It'll be temporary at first, then permanent after hearing." She explained the process. Paperwork, court dates, evidence like my medical records, the bruises photographed in stark detail. Jess interjected with questions, her voice firm. "What about the trust fund? Can they touch it?" Sophia shook her head. "Irrevocable trust? No, we'll confirm, but it's yours." As we talked, I felt the fortress taking shape, brick by brick. Sophia emailed forms, the notification pinging on Jess's laptop. I signed digitally, my finger tracing my name on the trackpad, the cursor wobbling slightly from the angle. Each signature was a declaration. No more dinners, no pleas for money, no enabling. "Emotional boundaries too," Sophia added, setting her pen down with a soft clack. "Therapy's key. I'll refer you to a counselor experienced in survivor recovery." Survivor. The word again, but this time it fit, empowering rather than labeling. Jess squeezed my hand, her palm warm, as Sophia outlined next steps. Police updates on Greg's arrest. He'd been picked up hiding at a buddy's, bail pending. The call ended with a plan, Sophia filing by afternoon, me resting. Jess closed the laptop with a snap, tucking it away. "You're doing this," she said, her eyes shining with pride. I leaned back, the pillow compressing under my head, and let the weight of it sink in. But the aftermath wasn't just legal, it was internal. Alone after Jess left for class, promising to return with dinner, I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the perforations like stars. Memories surfaced unbidden. Greg's fist on the table, Mom's averted eyes. I clenched my fist under the sheet, nails digging into my palm, channeling the anger into resolve. No more guilt trips, no forgiving for family's sake. By lunch, the social worker Elena returned, her clipboard in hand, sitting in the chair with a gentle creak. "How are we today?" she asked, crossing her legs, her skirt rustling. I shared the lawyer call, and she nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, practical boundaries, housing, finances." We mapped it out. Temporary dorm extension through school, then an apartment with security. I pulled out my phone, the cracked screen spiderwebbing under my thumb, and blocked Mom's number first. Her contact photo, a old snapshot of us smiling, vanishing with a swipe. Then Greg's, the delete button pressed firmly. Each action was a micro-victory, my heart rate spiking, then steadying. Elena suggested a safety plan, emergency contacts, apps for quick alerts. I downloaded one, the icon appearing on my home screen with a satisfying ding. "Healing starts here," she said, handing me pamphlets, the paper smooth and folded precisely. As she left, her heels clicking away, I practiced deep breaths, the inhale filling my lungs, exhale releasing tension, my chest rising and falling rhythmically. The leg pain flared with movement, but I ignored it, focusing on the new rules. Answer only supportive calls, redirect pity to purpose. Afternoon brought physical therapy, a tech named Mike wheeling me to the rehab room, the chair bumping over door thresholds. The space smelled of rubber mats and sweat, machines humming softly. He helped me stand on crutches, my arms straining under my weight, the metal cold against my underarms. Small steps, he coached, his hand steadying my elbow. Each hobble was agony, sweat beading on my forehead, dripping down my temple. But it mirrored the emotional work. Awkward, painful, necessary. Boundaries are like this, I thought, gripping the crutches tighter, the rubber grips compressing. One foot forward, then the other, establishing a new gait. Back in bed, exhausted, muscles quivering, I journaled on my phone, tapping out thoughts. No more invisibility. My rules now. The keys clicked softly, each word a reinforcement. Dinner arrived with Jess and Mia, takeout boxes steaming. Chinese, my favorite. We ate cross-legged on the bed, careful of the cast, chopsticks clacking. They shared campus news, but I steered to my progress. The orders, the blocks. Proud of you, Mia said, passing a fortune cookie, the wrapper crinkling. I cracked it open, the slip reading, "Strength comes from within." Fitting. Night fell, the room darkening, and I reviewed the day. Legal filings emailed back from Sophia confirmed. Greg in custody, Mom served papers. The fortress stood. No contact, therapy scheduled, support network alerted. Internal rules too. No dwelling on what-ifs, focus on recovery. I traced the cast's edge with my finger, the plaster rough, symbolizing the hard shell around my healing. Pain lingered, but so did peace. A quiet assurance. As sleep pulled me under, the monitor's beep fading, I knew these boundaries weren't walls to hide behind, but gates I controlled, opening only to light. Morning came with a gentle nudge from the nurse, her hand lightly shaking my shoulder as she set down a breakfast tray, the plastic clattering softly against the table. The smell of oatmeal and weak coffee wafted up, grounding me in the routine of hospital life. But my mind was already racing ahead, beyond these walls. The boundaries I'd set last night felt like fresh cement, hardening into place, and with them came a spark, an idea that had been simmering since Professor Harlan's call. If my trust fund and finance skills had been my shield against Greg's chaos, maybe they could be a weapon for others trapped like I had been. Reclaiming my legacy wasn't about erasing the past, it was about rewriting it, turning Claire, the victim, into Claire, the guide. But first, I had to take that step. And today, with discharge papers in hand, it started with a single outreach. Elena, the social worker, returned around noon, her clipboard tucked under her arm as she knocked lightly on the doorframe. She smiled warmly, pulling up the chair with a familiar scrape, her skirt smoothing out as she sat. "Ready to go home?" she asked, flipping open a folder, papers rustling. "Home, to the dorm, not Mom's house." I nodded, adjusting the crutches propped against the bed, their rubber tips gripping the floor. "Yeah, but I want to do more than just recover," I said, my voice steadier than yesterday. I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the pull in my leg, and met her eyes. "I've been thinking about using what I've learned, finance stuff, to help other survivors, like teaching them how to protect their money, build independence." Elena's eyebrows lifted, a genuine spark in her gaze as she set the clipboard down, her pen clicking off. "That's powerful, Claire, turning pain into purpose." She leaned in, elbows on her knees, her posture open and encouraging. We talked details then, my hands gesturing animatedly despite the IV scar still fresh on my arm. I described my major, finance, with a focus on personal budgeting, and how I'd volunteered at the campus clinic, helping students with loans. "But this would be different," I explained, tracing a circle on the bedsheet with my finger, the fabric bunching slightly. "Targeted. Workshops on trusts, emergency funds, spotting financial abuse." Elena nodded along, jotting quick notes, her handwriting looping across the page. "We have a survivor group at the community center. Starts next week. You could guest speak, share your story, tie it to practical tips." The idea ignited something in me, a warmth spreading through my chest like the first sip of that coffee. But doubt crept in too, my fingers tightened on the sheet, nails pressing into the weave. Who was I to lead? A 22-year-old with a broken leg and a fractured family? Elena must have seen it on my face because she reached out, her hand covering mine briefly, skin warm and reassuring. "You don't have to be perfect. Your experience is the credential." We planned it right there. A 1-hour session, me on crutches, focusing on basics. She emailed contacts from her phone, the send button tapping with finality, and left with a promise to follow up. As the door clicked shut, I exhaled slowly, the air whooshing out, carrying away some of the hesitation. Discharge took the afternoon, doctor's signatures, meds in a paper bag rustling as the nurse handed them over, instructions read aloud while I nodded, my foot tapping impatiently under the cast. Jess picked me up, her car idling outside, horn beeping cheerfully. She helped me in, adjusting the seat with a push, the mechanism clicking back. The drive to the dorm was quiet at first, traffic humming around us, but I shared the plan. "A workshop?" she said, glancing over, her hands relaxed on the wheel. "That's badass. I'll help with slides." Back in our room, the familiar mess, books stacked, laundry hamper overflowing, felt like a sanctuary. I hobbled to my desk, crutches thumping on the carpet, and opened my laptop, the screen flickering to life. Preparation consumed me. I typed outlines, fingers flying over the keys, each click building momentum. "Step 1, identify red flags," I wrote, thinking of Greg's demands, his oily voice echoing in memory. Micro-actions filled the hours, printing articles, the printer whirring and spitting pages, highlighting key phrases with a yellow marker, the cap popping off with a snap, organizing notes into folders, tabs color-coded. Emotions surfaced through it, anger at mom's enabling fueling a section on codependency, pride in dad's trust fund inspiring tips on legal protections. I paused often, rubbing my leg where the cast itched, a reminder of the cost, but it propelled me. "Reclaim your legacy," I muttered to myself, the words hanging in the air like a mantra. The day of the workshop arrived a week later, nerves twisting in my gut as Jess drove me to the center. The building, a modest brick structure with welcoming banners fluttering in the breeze. I adjusted my crutches in the passenger seat, the metal clinking against the door. Inside, the room smelled of fresh coffee and donuts, a circle of chairs arranged intimately. 8 women sat there, ages varying, faces etched with stories like mine, bruised spirits, if not bodies. Elena introduced me, her hand gesturing warmly, and I hobbled to the front, setting my notes on a podium, papers fluttering slightly in the AC draft. I started simple, my voice wavering at first, hands gripping the podium edges, wood smooth under my palms. "I'm Claire," I said, scanning their eyes, curious, guarded. "A month ago, my stepfather broke my leg because I wouldn't give him my money. My mom watched." Gasps rippled, chairs creaking as they shifted. But I pushed on, detailing the trust fund battles, my finance knowledge as armor. "Today, I want to share how to build your own." Slides clicked forward, Jess's handiwork, showing budgets, apps for tracking. I demonstrated with props. A fake bank statement, folding it to highlight hidden fees, the paper crinkling. Questions came midway, hands raising tentatively. One woman, mid-30s with a faded scar on her cheek, leaned forward, her necklace dangling. "How do you hide savings from him?" I explained separate accounts, my finger pointing to the slide, laser dot dancing. Another shared her story, ex controlling her paycheck, and I nodded, empathy tightening my throat. "That's financial abuse," I said, voice firm. "Here's how to break it. Start small, one secret deposit at a time." We role-played, me as the abuser, them practicing refusals, their voices growing stronger, laughter mixing with resolve. By the end, the room buzzed. I passed out resources, pamphlets stacking in their hands. One hugged me goodbye, her arms gentle around my shoulders, whispering, "You gave me hope." As they filed out, doors swinging shut, Elena squeezed my arm. "You reclaimed it, Claire. Your name means something new now." Driving back with Jess, window down, wind ruffling my hair, I felt it. Dad's legacy, twisted by Greg and Mom, now mine to redefine. Not vengeance, but impact. Helping these women achieve independence was my positive mark, erasing the stains of my family's failures. The cast still weighed me down, but my spirit lifted, ready for more sessions, more lives touched. This was just the beginning of flipping the script. The workshop wrapped up with a quiet hum of chairs pushing back, the women gathering their pamphlets and bags, that a few lingering to exchange numbers or offer quick words of thanks that warmed me from the inside out. I watched them go, leaning on my crutches, the rubber grips pressing into my palms as Elena locked the community center door behind us with a soft click. Jess helped me into the car, folding the crutches neatly into the back seat, their metal frames clinking together. The engine purred to life, and we pulled away from the curb. The building, shrinking in the rearview mirror, streetlights flickering on as dusk settled over the neighborhood. My leg ached from standing too long, the cast a heavy anchor, but it was a distant throb compared to the fullness in my chest. The sense of having planted seeds that might grow into someone else's independence. Back at the dorm, Jess dropped me off with a quick hug, her car door slamming shut before she drove away, taillights fading into the twilight. I maneuvered up the ramp slowly, crutches thumping rhythmically on the concrete, each step a small negotiation with gravity. The hallway was quiet, most students out for the evening, and I let myself into the room, the key turning with a familiar twist. I eased onto my bed, propping the cast on a pillow, the fabric giving slightly under the weight. The space felt smaller now, cluttered with textbooks and the faint scent of takeout from earlier, but it was mine, untethered from the house where Greg's shadow had loomed for so long. I reached for my journal on the nightstand, the leather cover cool under my fingers, and flipped it open, the pages rustling softly as I uncapped a pen, the click echoing in the stillness. That's when the reflection hit me, not as a sudden epiphany, but a gradual unfolding, like dawn creeping over the horizon. I stared at the blank page, pen hovering, ink beating at the tip, and let my mind trace the path I'd walked, or hobbled, these past months. It started with the attack, that kitchen floor cold against my back, pain exploding in my leg as Greg's boot came down, Mom's eyes averted in silent complicity. I'd replayed it so many times, the crack of bone, the betrayal slicing deeper than any fracture. But now, in this quiet room, with the hum of the fridge in the background, I realized it wasn't just survival I'd achieved, it was a reclamation of self-worth that didn't depend on their validation, or anyone's. My hand moved then, pen scratching across the paper in deliberate strokes, words flowing as thoughts crystallized. I wrote about the trust fund first, Dad's gift, guarded through years of Greg's manipulations, his oily demands at dinner tables where my achievements vanished like smoke. It had been my anchor, but holding onto it had taught me more. That my value wasn't in the dollars, but in the boundaries I'd set, the no I'd finally voiced without apology. Tears blurred the ink slightly as I recalled testifying in court weeks ago, the wooden stand hard under my palms, voice steady as I detailed the assault, Greg's face paling across the room, Mom's head bowed in the gallery. The judge's gavel had fallen like closure, sentences handed down, jail for him, probation for her, but the real verdict was internal. I was worthy of protection, of justice, regardless of their remorse or lack thereof. The pen paused, my fingers flexing around it, knuckles whitening briefly before relaxing. I thought of the recovery, the physical therapy sessions where I'd gripped parallel bars, sweat dripping down my temples, muscles screaming as I relearned to walk, the therapy couch where I'd unpacked the emotional scars, words tumbling out like released breath, unraveling the guilt Mom had woven into me. Friends like Jess had been lifelines, their presence a contrast to the invisibility at home, but even they couldn't define me. No, this peace came from within, from recognizing that my career choice, helping survivors through financial empowerment, wasn't about proving something to Greg or Mom. It was for me, a way to honor Dad's legacy while forging my own. I set the pen down, the cap snapping back on with finality, and leaned against the headboard, the wood creaking faintly. Outside, wind rustled leaves against the window, a soft patter like applause. Self-validation wasn't a grand moment, it was this, quiet acceptance in the dim light of a desk lamp, realizing my worth had always been there, buried under their chaos but unbreakable. The broken leg had healed into a faint scar, therapy had mended the deeper wounds, and testifying had closed the chapter. But the true peace? It bloomed now, in knowing I didn't need their approval to thrive. I'd flipped the script not for revenge but for myself, dedicating my days to workshops, counseling sessions, watching others light up with the same spark of independence I'd found. As I closed the journal, pages whispering shut, a calm settled over me, deeper than sleep. The room's shadows lengthened, but I felt illuminated from within. No more chasing echoes of family love that never came. My worth was internal, a steady flame, and in that realization, I found true peace, ready for whatever tomorrow brought. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life, like your efforts just vanished into the background while others' chaos took center stage? That's where my story started, but it didn't end there. Through the pain of betrayal and the grind of recovery, I learned that real strength comes from within. Not from fixing others or seeking their approval, but from building your own path. Testifying against Greg and Mom was tough, watching their faces in court as the truth came out, but it freed me to pour my energy into helping survivors like you gain financial freedom. Whether it's setting up a secret savings account or spotting the red flags of abuse, these tools can change lives. I know because they changed mine. So, what do you think? Did I reclaim my power enough, or is there more to the fight? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, or share your own story of breaking free. Your experiences could inspire someone else scrolling through right now. And, if this resonated, hit that like button, subscribe for more real talk stories on resilience and recovery, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Remember, you're not defined by what happened to you, but by what you do next. You've got this. Keep flipping that script.